And now let me invite Matylda CIOLKOSZ from Jagiellonian University in Kraków, who speak on the Temple of Moving Breath.
Good morning. I would like to begin by making a few disclaimers first. So the term, the Temple of Moving Breath, that I use in the title, this is my own term that I came up with as a metaphor, sort of. Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is the place I'm going to be talking about. This is a yoga school, a modern yoga school in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, southeast India. This is where I did my field research, and I'm going to just briefly try to explain what the practices at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram are about. The other disclaimer I'm going to need to make is that what is being, let's say, housed at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is not a religious movement, not a new religious movement, rather something that bears certain, let's say, family resemblance to religious movements. So we're not talking about religion here. I'll explain more of that in detail. So Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, or the Mandiram as I'm going to be calling it now for short, is, let's say, part of the history, a site important for the history of modern yoga in its variety initiated by Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. Krishnamacharya was a South Indian yogin who famously taught postural yoga practices in Mysore between the 1930s and the 1950s. Later on, he moved to Chennai where his son then founded the Mandiram. Yes, as I said, TKV Desikachar, the son of Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, founded the Mandiram in 1976. And this is the main, let's say, headquarters of Desikachar's style of yoga practice, and let's say the movement started by Desikachar. So this is a trans-denominational or a non-denominational movement that is bound by a ritualistic system of practice that is based on assumptions of esoteric nature that stem from the interpretation of the yoga of Patanjali and Hatha Yoga. It can be seen as a system of a holistic healing or movement cure that applies the techniques of yoga such as asana, pranayama, dharana, bhavana that are interpreted in Desikachar's idiosyncratic way. And the key element, the efficacy of this healing system of practice depends on is the prana, or the 5 prana, the vital breaths circulating within and around the human body. Now briefly, TKV Desikachar, as I said, he founded the Mandiram in 1976. He was the son of Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. He was also his student in his later phase in Chennai. Importantly, Desikachar held a degree in structural engineering, and his engineering mind is very visible in both his approach to deity, to religion, and to the human body that he understands in very interesting, very often technical terms. Now, when it comes to the site in question, the place in question, the Mandiram, it is situated in the middle of Chennai in the Ramakrishna Nagar. So we're dealing with a very dense, very thick environment, excruciating heat, great humidity, a busy, huge, polluted city filled with colors, filled with flavors, filled with sounds, and filled with people who are very extroverted, very pro-social, always willing to interact with you, to assist you, no matter if you actually want it or not very often. So it's a very, especially for an outsider, is a very overwhelming, although fascinating environment. And then we walk into the Mandiram, which is in the midst of all this, well, at a sort of quieter street, but still in the middle of a huge city. And, well, the interior is just pristinely white. It's empty. It's spacious, relatively cool due to the presence of fans and air conditioning. And it's almost, I'd say, monochromatic, save for the little mats or rugs that the students sit on, and save for the garlands of flowers hung around the photographs of Tirumalai Krishnamacharya. And also the people exhibit a very different attitude. They're very pro-social too, they're very helpful, but they only will assist you and help you when you ask for it, and they're very timid, very quiet, speaking in a deliberately soft manner. And this contrast between the outside and the interior is very striking, and it makes you think that the word Mandiram, or Mandira in Sanskrit, that means dwelling, palace, but also temple, is very appropriate, and there is something holy that's being celebrated or worshipped there. And well, my question is, what is this that might be, let's say, quote unquote, holy at the Mandiram? So on one hand, this is obviously place of the commemoration of, and let's say worship also, I should say quote unquote, of Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, who is always remembered there. He's referred to as the guru, the teacher, who's, as I said, his pictures, you know, grace the walls of the place. Also, it's a praise of the commemoration of his son, T.K. Vidyasikhachar, who's fondly remembered as Sir, who's the teacher of most of the teachers working there, teaching there, and he's commemorated now after his death in 2016, during monthly meetings when people chant together, when there are short lectures in his memory. Then again, another thing that is celebrated there is, I would say, personal space. So the Mandiram is clearly a place of creation of personal space. And to explain that, as many of the teachers there say, the Mandiram is a yoga hospital. Very often Tamilians, Chennai people come in to practice yoga for the sake of curing some health issues. And the way it happens is they're kind of taken out of the context. So, the everyday Tamil life is very dense. There's a lot of work being done. These are very busy people. There are multi-generational families these people are surrounded with. These families very often participate in decision-making regarding matters that we might consider personal. So when a person goes in there and pursues practices, they need to be given their own personal space where they can discover who they are, what they need, what kind of practices they need. So the Mandiram sort of creates that for the people, and this space that's being given has something, let's say, awe-inspiring about it. But most importantly, I would say that the Mandiram is the place of manipulation, transformation, and conservation of breath. And I would say that breath is the ritual substance that's being manipulated within the practices that I'm going to briefly describe. And importantly, I think we have to remember that we're in India, and in Indian ritual, the transformation of certain ritual substances, the manipulation of them is a very important part of ritual. So this is what I'd like to refer to when I talk about breath or prana at the Mandiram. Now, when it comes, as I said, the yoga of Vidyasikhachar that is being practiced at the Mandiram is a non-denominational or trans-denominational movement. Now, Krishnamacharya was Sri Vaishnava. He was a Vishnuit, but his son, Vidyasikhachar, was decisively non-religious. He was a rationalist, he was an engineer. But his assumptions regarding, let's say, deity are somewhat perennialist, I would say. In one of his books, he writes, "It does not matter what name we use for the divine, God, Allah, Ishvara, or whatever. Anything that brings us closer to understanding that there is a power higher and greater than ourselves is yoga." So the practices at the Mandiram can be religious, can be related to a chosen deity. This is actually a reference to the term Ishta Devata that's known from the yoga of Patanjali. But it can be totally non-religious, and it actually, when the teachers know that a practitioner is a non-religious person, they will purposefully avoid religious connotations. On the other hand, the approach to divinity is somewhat, I would say, agnostic. As I said before, the CIOLKOSZ talks about a higher power, a higher intelligence, something that's highest, that's higher than ourselves. So it's a very kind of vague notion of deity that gives a lot of freedom in interpretation, also in atheist terms. Then again, the notion when talking about divinity or God, the notion of Ishvara from Patanjali Yoga Shastra, from the Yoga of Patanjali, is used, but also in a very kind of vague and unspecific way sometimes. On one hand, it's just the highest intelligence. On the other hand, Ishvara is also understood as Guru, as the teacher. And this is also actually a reference to Patanjali Yoga Shastra, so the writings related to the yoga of Patanjali. In the Yoga Shastra, Ishvara is called the teacher of the previous ones, the previous teachers, Purvesham api Guruhu. And this is what the CIOLKOSZ refers to when he calls Ishvara as the teacher. And according to one of his disciples, actually, the CIOLKOSZ considered his father as Ishvara. So here what we are dealing with, that Ishvara, the lord of the yoga of Patanjali, is, well, his or its significance as God is downplayed, whereas the significance as a teacher is, let's say, underscored. And obviously the significance of a teacher in the Indian tradition, in yogic tradition, cannot be overestimated. But still, it is not God in what we might understand as deity. So anyway, the practice of yoga at the Mandiram is seen as a way to unite with some sort of higher or highest intelligence, or the ultimate teacher, understood in vague terms. And the practices there are a means to attain that. But now a very important thing is that, well, this goal of yoga, of united with the highest, requires a strong will, trust, and the ability to keep up one's efforts constantly. And a sine qua non condition of this pursuit is good health. And hence, the healing method of yoga at the Mandiram is a way to prepare the practitioner for attaining the goal of yoga. And in this pursuit of healing, of good health, prana, or the vital breath, is the key and a very important medium. Now, when we talk about prana, obviously, I'm sure this is a term that all of you have heard here or there. This is a very old term that already appears in the Vedic context somewhere around the second millennium before Christ. It's a vital breath or life breath that is one of the elements of the Vedic sacrifice. The concept of prana appears extensively within the Upanishadic contexts as the element of the ritual interiorization. Within the yoga of Patanjali, prana is what is being controlled through the techniques of pranayama. It is a crucial medium in the techniques, in the medieval techniques of Hatha Yoga. And now when I'm talking about prana, in this context I'm talking about prana sensu largo, which concerns many vital breaths, the five main of which are Udana, Prana, Samana, Apana, and Vyana, and you can see their location within the body on this simple graphic here. When it comes to the CIOLKOSZ's interpretation of prana, which is, well, basically his own interpretation of previous interpretations, as relation to health. This is a fluid. Prana is a fluid that's present both within and outside of the body. And according to the CIOLKOSZ, sickness is the state of carrying blockages within the body that hinder the internal flow of prana and make it disperse outside, whereas health makes it possible to retain prana inside the body through with a peaceful flow, and during exhalation to remove through the energy of prana, the blockages to expel them out of the body. So this movement, this model, is a crucial model for interpreting the practices we're talking about. There is also an idea of the connection of mental activity and breath and prana. So it is said that mental agitation is related to the restlessness of prana, whereas mental equipoise would entail steady flow of prana. So whatever techniques we apply, yogic techniques we apply, we want to get smooth flow of prana that assures both physical and mental health. So what are those practices? I'm going to mention few of them. The first one is asana, yogic posture. Now, there are very many in modern so-called postural yoga. There are very many different ways of performing yogic postures. And within the practices prescribed by the Krishnamacharya, postures are performed in coordination with breath, a series of alternating movements. Lengthening and expansion of the body is coordinated with inhalation. Contraction of the body is coordinated with exhalation, whereas stopping of movement is coordinated with holding of breath. And the more experienced the practitioner, the longer the breath becomes and the longer its retention becomes, and also the slower the motion becomes. So we are dealing with a lot of purposeful and slow extended back and forth motions. And these linear movements are very often presented by these stick diagrams in manuals. It really give you kind of the linear character of the movement very nicely. So in a nutshell, I would say that practice of asana is a means to become attentive to and to lengthen the breath through the motion of the body. The second very important technique is the technique of pranayama, which once again is gradual lengthening of inhalation, exhalation, and retention of breath. And it is also, it's not removed from the movement of the body entirely, especially at the initial phases. Also, movement of the body is used to assist the expansion of breath. And here within the pranayama practices, a very interesting model of the body is of the torso, I would say, as a furnace is applied. And please apologies for this kind of makeshift picture that I made myself. So there's the idea that the body is a furnace, there's a fire burning in the stomach area. When we inhale, and there are impurities residing in the lower abdomen. So when we inhale, the breath moves the abdominal fire downwards. When we retain the inhalation, these impurities in the lower abdomen are being burnt. As we exhale, they come back up and are expelled from the body as ashes. And when we retain the breath after exhalation, we prevent those, let's say, burned impurities from re-entering the body. So hence the aforementioned blockages are removed. So the practice of pranayama, I would say in a nutshell, is a means to purify the body from blockages and toxins through control of breath. Once again, that is guided by motion. Briefly, two more practices I'd like to describe. Meditative practices that are a preparation for meditation, let's say, sensu stricto. There are forms of dharana, of focus on different objects. These can be external objects, that can be the body. Here we have the technique of nyasa, which is basically touching the surface of the body. They can be also virtual objects, the objects that can be even very abstract, such as notion of, I don't know, friendship, or the notion of a teacher. Anyway, all these practices of a concentration are also synchronized with simple alternating movements and with chanting, with Sanskrit chants, which once again are a form of controlling breath through this time making sounds. And chanting practices are also separate practices. They have a communal aspect, very often, very important for bringing the group together, but also they entail, let's say, breath work. They are basically recitations of Sanskrit texts, both very ancient and quite modern. Focus is laid on proper pronunciation, on proper meter, on proper intonation, not so much on the meaning of the chants. But what's once again very important, we have a breath control technique through chanting, through singing. So to sum up this presentation, Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram is a place carved out in the middle of busy Chennai where breath is cultivated and celebrated. Focus on worshipping deities is at best an auxiliary activity. The main activity is setting the breath in motion in order to find consolation and health through observing its path. Krishnamacharya might have been Ishvara, the Lord of Yoga, to his son and student Desikachar. Both the father and the son are celebrated at the Mandiram, as are all the teachers whose students bow at their feet to pay respect, show gratitude, and pledge obedience. Nonetheless, if there is anything truly sacred at the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, it is the breath itself as it moves relentlessly as both teachers and students come and go. Thank you.
Oh, right there.
Perhaps unfortunately it's not a technical question, but it may be of interest nevertheless. I have no doubt that masters of yoga enjoy better health than your average Joe, but at the same time everybody falls sick. So when an advanced master does fall sick, how do they explain this, given that their explanation of sickness is one about impurities in the body that they can control or have nearly perfect control over?
Well, within the schools of yoga that I've been researching, there's never been a claim of absolute or ultimate health. It's more kind of and I guess the fallacy of the human system, of the practices, is something that's being acknowledged. So it doesn't, your practices don't shield you 100% from falling sick. They just lower the possibility, and also once you do fall sick, you will use the practices to get better. So yeah, I don't.
That
you
makes
fall
sense.
sick, and then yeah, they can find their way out of it.
Yeah. Sounds realistic. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.